Ever step on the scale, see a number staring back at you, and just think, okay, but what does this actually mean? Maybe the number's lower than you expected, but you still don't feel all that fit. Or it's higher, but you feel energetic and healthy. Here's something fitness culture rarely says out loud. That number on the scale, it barely tells you anything important. It doesn't know muscle from fat or water weight from bone density. It can't spot the difference between a body that's barely hanging on and one that's thriving. So what actually matters? Body fat percentage. But honestly, even that number only gives you part of the picture. One person's 25% body fat can look totally different on someone else. A lot goes into it. Genetics, muscle mass, age, ethnicity, and how your body carries fat all play huge roles in how you look and feel. Let's get real about what these numbers mean. We're going to walk through every level of body fat percentage, from the most extreme ever recorded, all the way down to the absolute limits of biology. You'll see what each level actually looks like, what kinds of diets and exercise habits tend to go with it, and, most importantly, what it all means for your health, energy, and life. I'm Emma Chamberlain, and you're watching the infographics. So let's start at the very top. The highest body fat percentage on record, according to Guinness, is 80%. At that point, fat covers almost every muscle and bone. Moving is nearly impossible. Breathing, sleeping, even just sitting up, everything hurts and takes effort. This isn't just about eating too much. It's a serious medical condition, usually tied to illness, metabolic problems, and a lot of fluid retention. People at this level are literally fighting for their lives every second. Thankfully, hardly anyone is ever in that situation. Let's get to the numbers most people actually deal with. At 50% body fat, both men and women are considered morbidly obese. Fat hangs over the belly, hips, chest, and thighs. You won't see any muscle definition, not anywhere. Just getting around is exhausting. Walking, taking the stairs, even sleeping becomes tough. Joints ache. Breathing gets harder. Fatigue is constant. One guy who lived at this size put it simply, "I'm always tired. I'm just always fatigued." That kind of exhaustion isn't laziness or some lack of willpower. It's just physics. Carrying that much extra weight drains your energy. There's not much left over for anything else. Diets at this level are usually packed with calories, mostly from ultra-processed foods, and there's usually not much exercise. But it's not just a matter of making bad choices. When moving hurts and you're wiped out all the time, exercise feels impossible. When you're always tired, cooking healthy food feels like climbing a mountain. The cycle keeps repeating itself, and it gets harder to break free. Here's where things start to split for men and women. Women hit the severely obese mark at over 45% body fat. For men, it's over 40%. So at 50%, men have gone way past that line, and women are also in the severely obese range, but the health risks and effects aren't exactly the same. Drop down to 40% body fat, and the situation changes a bit, especially for women. Men are still considered morbidly obese, but women shift into the obese category. That difference actually matters for health and for everyday life. Women at 40% body fat usually have hips that are much wider than their shoulders, the classic pear shape. At this point, many women aren't struggling as much with basic movement, stairs, sleep, bending over, or just getting through the day, though it really depends on fitness and how the fat is spread out. But here's where it gets tricky. Two women, both at 40% body fat, can look completely different. Some carry their fat evenly and look big but not necessarily unhealthy. For others, especially if they're less active or don't exercise, there's a lot more fat around the upper arms, stomach, hips, and thighs. Same number, totally different bodies, and totally different health stories. Men who hit 40% body fat face a much bigger risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, stroke, diabetes, you name it. The real problem is where the fat goes. It piles up around the belly, wrapping itself around your organs. That's called visceral fat, and it's especially nasty because it triggers inflammation. Women are at risk too, but not quite as much, since their bodies usually stash more fat just under the skin instead of around their organs. Here's a stat that might surprise you. The average American woman has about 39% body fat. That's officially in the obese range. For a lot of people reading this, that's actually pretty close to home. Not because they're not trying, not because they're unhealthy or lazy, but simply because this is the American average now. This is the new normal. Drop down to 30% body fat and things start to shift, especially for men. At this level, muscle mass, how much actual lean muscle you have, plays a huge role in both how you look and how you feel. There was a study where two guys had the same body fat percentage, right around 33%. One had 97 pounds of lean mass, the other, about 150 pounds. They looked completely different. The second guy worked out regularly, so even at the same fat percentage, he looked way fitter. That's why just looking at body fat percentage doesn't tell the whole story. A guy with more muscle at 30% body fat will usually have more energy, perform better in the gym, and look more toned overall. He still faces some health risks from the fat, but all that muscle actually helps his metabolism and day-to-day strength. In the US, about 40% of men are sitting in this 30% body fat range. At this point, fat stops being just a visual thing. It really starts to impact long-term health. For women, 30% body fat is actually pretty good. It's at the higher end of the healthy range, but it's still healthy. Even among younger women, ages 20 to 29, you're not considered obese unless you're over 32% body fat. So you'll see plenty of women in the gym who look fit, eat well, and don't obsessively diet, and they'll still be around 30%. In fact, only about 10% of American women are leaner than that. But here's the catch. A woman at 30% body fat might work out and eat healthy, or she might barely move and eat takeout every night. Same percentage, but totally different lifestyles and health outcomes. Individual habits really start to matter here. Now there's one more piece people usually ignore. Age. Around 30% body fat, age starts to change how that percentage actually looks on you. As you get older, it's harder to build muscle and your metabolism slows down. Muscle mass and bone density fade with time, so body fat naturally creeps up. And here's the twist. Having a bit more body fat as you age isn't just okay, it's actually a good thing. Fat acts like a backup generator. It gives you energy when you're sick or not eating much, which happens more often as you get older. A little extra fat helps your body keep going through illness and supports your immune system. If you're older and super lean, you don't have much in reserve. That makes it tougher to recover when you're sick or injured. In extreme cases, your body starts breaking down muscle for energy, which is the last thing you want as you get older. So when we talk about what's normal, the numbers move. The average American man has about 27% body fat. For guys aged 20 to 49, that's considered obese. But hit 50, and suddenly that same number is just fine. The standards change as the risks change. A bit of extra padding in your 60s is protective. In your 30s, it's a red flag. Let's talk about ethnicity for a second, because this is where things get interesting, and where BMI really fails. One study from the International Journal of Obesity looked at people who were the same age, gender, and body fat percentage, and compared their BMIs. Black Americans had BMIs about 1.3 points lower than white Americans at the same body fat. Polynesians were lower by about 4.5 points. So two people with the same BMI can have very different levels of body fat. Polynesians especially tend to have a lot more muscle, which changes the health story completely. The study also looked at Chinese, Ethiopian, Indonesian, and Thai groups. They all had lower BMIs than the white group, by about 2 to 5 points, even with the same body fat percentage. That just shows how much genetics, build, and metabolism affect all these numbers. South Asian people are a great example of how body fat isn't just about numbers on a scale. They usually have smaller frames, but what really matters is where their bodies stash fat. Instead of spreading it out under the skin, a lot of it ends up deep around their organs, what's called visceral fat. That's the dangerous kind. So two people with the same body fat percentage can have totally different health risks, just because of where that fat sits. It all comes back to genetics. Our genes decide where we store fat, how much of it we carry, and what that means for our health. This is why two people with identical body fat percentages can end up looking and feeling completely different. Let's talk about what 20% body fat actually looks like. For men, 20% can mean a lot of things. Some guys at this level look toned, with clear muscles on their arms and shoulders. Others look skinny at first glance, but have a bit of a belly or softer areas around the chest and arms, what people sometimes call skinny fat. Same percentage, totally different vibe. Only about 12% of men in the US have 20% body fat or less. For some, this is the sweet spot. They feel healthy, happy, full of energy. But it's not the same for everyone. If you used to be much heavier and worked your way down to 20%, it feels like a huge victory. But if you were always lean and only got to 20% by skipping workouts and getting sloppy, you probably don't feel great. Again, it's genetics running the show. Everybody's got their own best range where they feel and perform at their peak, and it can vary by a few percentage points from one person to another. That's why body fat charts never tell the whole story. For women, 20% body fat is a different world. Only about 2% of women in the US have less than 25% body fat, so hitting 20% is rare. Women at this level usually have visible abs and strong muscle definition. Think athletes. Most professional sportswomen hang out right around 20%, except for gymnasts, who often go even lower. The upside is that 20% is a level women can keep up without going to extremes. As long as you're working out regularly and mostly eating well, you can stay here, feel healthy, and not have to starve yourself. It's lean, but not scary. But once you start dipping below 20%, things change. At 15% body fat, women are pushing into risky territory. The body will fight to keep fat from dropping any lower. Sure, muscles pop and everything looks defined, but staying here isn't a good idea for most women. Usually, women only hit 15% for a short stretch, like training for a big competition. And it really depends on the sport. One Canadian study found that female basketball players usually have body fat between 20 and 27%. Tennis players range from 16 to 24%. Swimmers, 14 to 24%. But gymnasts, they're down at 10 to 16%. Marathon runners are even leaner, at 10 to 15%. But those super low numbers come with downsides. Women who stick around 15% for too long can lose their periods, feel wiped out, and risk lower bone density. Gut health takes a hit, and hunger gets out of control because your body wants that fat back. Trying to stay this lean becomes a daily grind. Women need a certain amount of fat, 10 to 12% just for basic health, so 15% is cutting it close. That's not a zone you want to live in. For men, 15% body fat is way more doable. Plenty of guys reach this level by hitting the gym a few times a week and cleaning up their diets, mainly by cutting back on sugar, fat, and junk food. Whether it's easy or tough to stay here depends on your genes and where you started. Dropping down from a high weight takes a lot more effort than trimming a few points from an already healthy spot. Guys who are naturally lean and put on muscle easily have a leg up. And you don't have to be a fitness freak to get to 15%. Some young guys who don't work out at all can still have a flat stomach and a touch of muscle definition, just thanks to their natural build. When you look at the numbers, only 2% of American men are at or below 15% body fat, So if you're here, you're in a pretty exclusive club. Now, let's see what happens when you drop even lower. If you're a guy sitting at 12% body fat, you're in a pretty exclusive club. Hardly anyone lands here by accident. Getting down to this number usually takes a ton of discipline. Think strict meal prep, eating the same boring stuff every day, and sticking to your workouts like your life depends on it. You know the stereotype: chicken, rice, and broccoli, cooked so plain it almost feels like a punishment. The jump from 15% to 12% body fat is actually obvious. At 12%, you start to see abs, not because you're doing endless sit-ups, but because there's just not much fat covering your muscles anymore. That muscle definition? It's mostly about how lean you are, not necessarily how strong. Now, for women, 12% body fat is a whole different story. That's deep into bodybuilding territory. For most women, you can't even get there without some kind of performance-enhancing drugs. Sure, you might look absolutely shredded, but you'll probably feel terrible. Energy tanks, athletic performance drops off a cliff. At this point, it's all about looks, not how well your body actually works. Outside of bodybuilding, you only really see body fat this low in sports like gymnastics, where extreme leanness is almost part of the job description. But even there, it comes with a cost. Missed periods, health problems, and a constant gnawing hunger. Seriously, you end up thinking about food all day, every day. For women, 12% is barely above the absolute minimum fat their bodies need just to function. Now, let's talk about 10% body fat. If you're a guy who lifts, 10% means you look ridiculously ripped. Abs everywhere, veins popping, muscles looking like they're about to explode out of your skin. But here's the catch. You can't slip up. At all. Unless you somehow won the genetic lottery, getting to 10% is a full-time job, and staying there is even harder. Chances are you're not that genetic unicorn. Now, if you're a super skinny guy who doesn't work out but manages to hit 10%, you'll still have visible abs and definition, but you'll look, well, pretty thin. Not that muscular cover model look, just skinny with some muscle showing through. Same number, totally different vibe. For women, 10% is right at the edge of what's biologically possible. Honestly, you really don't want to be here. Even bodybuilders only dip this low right before a competition, and it's brutal. Missed periods, hair loss, constant fatigue, and a brain that just won't stop thinking about food. The body stops cooperating. It's survival mode, nothing more. Drop to 8% body fat and things get rough for guys too. Sex drive tanks, sleep gets weird, your brain feels foggy. Why? Your body thinks you're starving and starts shutting down everything that isn't absolutely essential. Food becomes an obsession. Energy crashes and you're running on empty. At this point, honestly, you'd trade your savings for a cheeseburger. Not even joking. Your body just wants to eat. Nothing else matters. Men lose their sex drive for the same reason women lose their periods. When your body's not getting enough fuel, it decides now's not the time to be thinking about kids. Everything, libido, mood, clear thinking, gets sacrificed to keep you alive long enough to find your next meal. Women at 8%? That's basically unheard of. If it does happen, it's dangerously unhealthy, like life-threatening. It's not a fitness goal, it's a red flag. And then there's 5% body fat for men. This is the danger zone. Getting here usually means steroids or other drugs. Go below 8% and your body hits the panic button, starts burning muscle for fuel, does whatever it takes to survive. Your system just can't figure out why you're not eating, and it gets desperate. At 5%, you're not healthy. You're not thriving. You're just barely holding on. Your body's sending every signal it can to tell you, enough is enough. So, after all that, what's a realistic body fat percentage to aim for? The American College of Sports Medicine has some straightforward numbers. For women, the healthy range is 20 to 32%. For men, it's 10 to 22%. And yeah, those are ranges, not magic numbers. That's because what's healthiest for you comes down to a mix of genetics, age, activity, and how your body actually works. If you're somewhere in those ranges, you're already doing better than most. You're fueling your body to move, think, recover, and even fend off sickness. But here's what really matters. Body fat percentage is just a tool. That's it. It gives you some info, but it doesn't say a thing about your worth or who you are. It doesn't define how valuable or beautiful you are. Fitness marketing loves to push the idea that lower is always better, that you have to chase a smaller number no matter what. Truth is, it's not that simple. Your body fights to keep you in a certain zone for a reason. Evolution wired us to hold on to some fat. The leanest people aren't always the healthiest, or the happiest, or the ones who live longest. Trust your body a little. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen to it. So next time you step on a scale or see a body fat reading, don't let that number run your life. Check in with yourself. How do you actually feel? Do you wake up with energy? Sleeping okay? Can you do the things you love? Run, dance, lift, play, without pain? Do you feel nourished, present, alive? That stuff matters more than any number. If you found a new way of looking at health or fitness in this episode, hit that like button. It really helps us out and lets us know you want more honest, no-nonsense content. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming up. We've got some great deep dives on the way, more about health, nutrition, and the real science behind how our bodies work. And we want to hear from you. Did any of these numbers surprise you? Did you learn something new about body fat? Drop your thoughts below. We read every single comment, and your questions shape what we talk about here. Maybe share this video with someone who's stressing about the scale or chasing a body fat percentage that's doing more harm than good. Be that friend who starts the conversation. That's it for today. I'm your host, Emma Chamberlain, and this is the infographics. Stay curious, stay healthy, and don't forget, your body isn't a project to fix. It's your one true home. Take care of it. See you next time.